My ex used my house as a hotel for her friends, so I changed the locks, left a note, and let them wake up to regret. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I like to think I'm a decent person, maybe too decent for my own good. When my ex, Natalie, called me saying her lease fell through and she just needed a week to get things sorted, I didn't even hesitate. We hadn't spoken in months since the breakup, but I still carried that leftover guilt, the kind that makes you feel responsible for someone who's no longer yours. She sounded desperate on the phone. "Please, I'll stay out of your way. I just need to figure things out," she said. Her voice cracked just enough to trigger that old reflex in me, the one that used to make me drop everything to fix her problems. When she showed up, she looked tired but put together. She even brought groceries and thanked me at least 5 times before dinner. "You're seriously saving me," she told me, with that familiar smile, the one that used to melt every boundary I had. I told myself this time would be different. I wasn't her boyfriend anymore. I was just helping. For the first few days, everything was fine. She was polite, cooked once or twice, even offered to Venmo me for utilities. We talked casually, nothing deep, nothing personal. It almost felt like 2 civilized adults sharing space almost. But there were small things that didn't sit right. Her phone never left her hand. She'd laugh at texts late at night, whispering, "Oh, it's just friends." One morning I noticed she'd rearranged my living room for better light, as she called it. It wasn't a big deal, but it felt invasive. Still, I brushed it off. I wanted to believe I was doing the right thing. What I didn't realize then was that I hadn't just opened my home. I'd reopened a door she was never planning to close again. The first week passed quietly. I thought maybe I'd overreacted. Natalie was still there, but she kept saying things like, "I found a couple of places just waiting for confirmation." She said it with that same easy charm that used to make me believe every excuse. Then the small things began. My groceries vanished faster than usual, but she always had takeout for herself. My laundry pile somehow doubled, and her clothes started showing up in my dresser drawers. I'd come home from work to find my Netflix account logged into her old shows. Comfort viewing, she called it. One night, I found her sprawled on the couch, wine glass in hand, watching a reality show we used to mock together. I joked, "Did you move back in without telling me?" expecting her to laugh. Instead, she just smirked and said, "Would it be that bad?" That's when the unease started to sink in. The line between guest and resident was blurring fast. She stopped offering to help with bills and started referring to the apartment as our place in passing. When I mentioned that she should start packing soon, she sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes. "You make it sound like I'm some freeloader." "I'm looking okay? Not everyone has the luxury of stability like you." That comment hit harder than it should have. Natalie had always been good at turning guilt into currency. She'd remind me of how lucky I was, how she just needed time. I'd end up apologizing for even bringing it up. The emotional déjà vu was undeniable. The same manipulation I swore I'd escaped. Every day her things multiplied, her presence expanded, and my patience thinned by the end of that week. I started to realize something I didn't want to admit. Natalie wasn't looking for a new place. She'd already found mine. It happened on a Friday night. One of those long weeks where all I wanted was silence and sleep. I remember unlocking my front door and being hit with a wall of noise, laughter, music, and the smell of cheap alcohol mixed with perfume. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. The lights were dim, and the living room was full of people, at least 10 of them. Some were sitting on my couch, others dancing barefoot on my rug. And one guy was pouring vodka into my expensive blender like it was a party prop. My first instinct was disbelief. "What the hell is this?" I shouted over the music. Natalie turned from the kitchen, grinning like she'd just been caught with a surprise birthday cake. "Relax. It's just a few friends." "You're so tense all the time. I thought you could use some fun."
Fun.
That's what she called it. I felt my jaw tighten as I looked around. My framed photos shoved aside, a drink ring staining the table I built myself. One of her friends, a guy I'd never met, raised his glass toward me. "You must be the landlord." "Sick place, man." I snapped, "Yeah, and the landlord says the party's over." "Okay, But Natalie rolled her eyes and said loudly, "God, you're still the same. Always killing the vibe." Her friends laughed. And that laughter cut deeper than I expected. After they finally stumbled out near 2 a.m., stood in the wreckage, spilled drinks, cigarette butts on the balcony, and a pile of dirty cups in my sink, Natalie leaned against the counter, still smiling lazily. "Don't be mad," she said softly. "It's not like I threw a rave." I didn't respond. Because in that moment, I realized something worse than betrayal. I wasn't even angry enough to leave. I was trapped again, in the same emotional cycle. Only this time it was happening inside my own house. After that night, everything changed, not for the better, but in the kind of slow, suffocating way you don't notice until it's too late. Natalie's friends started showing up more often. At first, it was one or two just crashing after a night out. Then it became a routine. I'd wake up to strangers in my kitchen, making coffee with my mugs, acting like they belonged there the first time it happened. I found a girl I'd never met brushing her teeth in my bathroom. She smiled at me through the mirror and said, "Morning." Natalie said, "It's cool." That sentence stuck in my head. Natalie said, "It's cool." As if my permission no longer mattered. When I confronted her later, Natalie brushed it off like I was being dramatic. "They're just friends, babe." She paused, realizing her slip, then corrected herself. "I mean, they just needed a place to crash." You know, I hate saying no to people. Her excuse sounded noble, but it was the same old story. Generosity at my expense. My grocery bill doubled, my water pressure dropped, and my couch started to smell like perfume and sweat. Even my quiet mornings were gone. There was always someone asleep on the floor, someone laughing on the phone, someone using my Wi-Fi. When I brought it up again, she sighed like I was ruining her peace. "You're overthinking. They'll be gone soon," but they never were. It wasn't just that she was using my home. It was that she was using my kindness, weaponizing it, and I hated how familiar it felt. Like every time in our relationship when she'd twist guilt into compliance, every morning I'd step over someone's shoes, someone's bag, someone's mess, and every time I'd tell myself the same lie, just one more week, but deep down I knew it. My house wasn't mine anymore. It had turned into something else, a hotel for her chaos. It didn't take long before every conversation with Natalie turned into a guilt trip. Whenever I tried to set boundaries, she'd twist my words until I was the villain. One night, after finding yet another stranger asleep on my couch, I finally snapped. "Natalie, this is insane. You can't just let people crash here without asking me." She didn't apologize. She smirked. "You act like I'm running a hotel or something." I stared at her. "That's exactly what you're doing." Her eyes narrowed. "Wow, you really think I'd use you like that? I thought we were past your control issues." That's how she did it, always flipping the script. I'd start the argument angry, and by the end, I'd be the one apologizing. She brought up old memories, old wounds. "You left me once already. You really want to do that again? When I have nowhere else to go." Those words cut through my anger like a knife. She always knew which part of me to pull, the part that felt responsible for her pain. I hated how quickly I folded. Over the next few days, her behavior shifted. She'd act sweet in front of her friends. "Oh, he's such a good guy." Always so patient with me. But the second we were alone, the warmth vanished. If I asked about moving out, she'd scoff. "I'm not rushing just to make you comfortable." When I stopped engaging, she escalated. She started posting stories online, pictures of my living room, captions like "best roommate ever." My friends saw them and texted me jokes, thinking it was funny. It wasn't. It was humiliating. The more I tried to regain control, the more she painted me as cold. Heartless, the bad guy who kicked her when she was down. That's when I realized this wasn't confusion or desperation. It was strategy. Natalie wasn't stuck. She was settled. It was a Wednesday night when everything finally snapped. I'd worked a long shift, dead tired, craving nothing but silence and a hot shower. But the second I stepped inside, I froze. There were voices, too, unfamiliar, coming from my bedroom. My bedroom. I pushed open the door and saw them, a couple tangled in my sheets. Clothes scattered on the floor, laughing until they saw me standing there. The girl gasped, clutching the blanket. The guy sat up, defensive. "Whoa, but Natalie said it was cool. For a second, I didn't even feel anger, just numb disbelief. I turned slowly toward the living room, where Natalie was sitting on the couch scrolling her phone. "Who the hell are those people?" I demanded. She didn't even look up. "Friends. They just needed a place to crash after the club." "In my bed, Natalie?" My voice cracked, half rage, half exhaustion. She finally glanced up, unfazed. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a bed. You act like I brought strangers off the street." "That's exactly what you did," I shouted, louder than I meant to. The couple scrambled out, muttering apologies as they gathered their things. I didn't care. My hands were shaking. "You've turned my home into a free-for-all." Natalie stood now, eyes flashing with that familiar blend of defiance and guilt. "You're overreacting. You've always had this need to control everything. God forbid someone feels comfortable around you." Something inside me broke right then, not like a snap, but a quiet, irreversible tear. I realized it wasn't about the bed or the guests or even the lies. It was about how little respect she had left for me. That night, after she stormed into the spare room and slammed the door, I sat in the dark for hours. For the first time, I wasn't wondering why she did it. I was wondering how much longer I'd let her. After that night, something in me went quiet. Not angry, quiet, strategic quiet. I stopped arguing. Stopped reminding her about boundaries, rent, or respect. Natalie mistook my silence for surrender, but it wasn't. It was preparation. The next morning, she strutted into the kitchen, humming, acting like nothing happened. "You want coffee?" she asked casually, like she hadn't just let strangers sleep in my bed. I just nodded, watching her move around like she owned the place. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to yell anymore. I was going to end this. I started small. I documented everything. Photos of her friends sleeping on the couch, videos of the parties, screenshots of her texts bragging about hosting people. I even called a lawyer friend to ask what counted as trespassing and what didn't. He told me, "As long as you're the leaseholder and there's no rental agreement, she has zero claim." Yes. That sentence felt like oxygen, so I played the part, polite, calm, even friendly. "Stay as long as you need," I told her one night while scrolling my phone. She smiled, relieved. "See? This is the version of you I missed." I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. Days passed. Her friends came and went like revolving doors, completely unaware that the man cleaning their beer bottles and fixing their messes was planning their eviction. I even started leaving early, pretending to avoid the chaos. In reality, I was coordinating with a locksmith, making sure the timing was perfect. And through it all, Natalie got comfortable, too comfortable. She left clothes draped on every chair, used my shampoo, my towels, my space, my patience. But I didn't say a word, because I knew something she didn't. The next time they walked into my house, it would be the last time they ever did. Saturday came faster than I expected, the day everything would finally unravel. I knew Natalie had plans that night. She'd been talking all week about a small get-together, which in her language meant 30 people and a destroyed living room. That was perfect by late evening. The noise was already spilling out of the apartment, bass thumping, laughter echoing through the hallway, the smell of alcohol and cheap perfume bleeding under the door. I waited until I got her text. "Don't wait up." That was my cue. I drove back quietly around midnight, parking a block away. The building lights glowed faintly through my windshield as I watched silhouettes moving behind my curtains. My curtains. My hands didn't shake this time. I felt calm, grounded, certain. The kind of calm you get when anger burns itself into resolve. The locksmith met me 10 minutes later. An older guy with tired eyes who didn't ask questions. "You're sure she's not on the lease?" he asked. "Positive," I replied. He nodded, went to work, and within 15 minutes, every lock in my apartment clicked into a fresh start before leaving. I grabbed a single sheet of paper, wrote in bold black ink, "Hotels closed." Checkout time was an hour ago. I taped it neatly on the front door, right next to the peephole, where she'd see it the moment she tried to open the door again. Then I walked away. No guilt, no hesitation. I booked a room at a cheap motel across town, poured myself a whiskey, and opened my phone to silence. For the first time in months, I didn't care what came next. Whether she screamed, cried, or cursed my name, it didn't matter. Because tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about finally locking the door on someone who'd been living rent-free in my life for far too long. The next morning, my phone was a war zone. Dozens of missed calls, voicemails, and texts, all from Natalie. Some messages were angry, others pleading. The shift in tone was almost comical. 6:42 a.m., what the hell did you do? 7:03 a.m., you locked us out. Are you insane? 7:27 a.m., please, just talk to me. This isn't funny. By 8 o'clock, she was sending voice notes, her tone cracking between fury and desperation. I ignored every one of them. Instead, I sipped my motel coffee and watched the sunrise through the grimy window. For once, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Later that morning, I checked the building's group chat, the one she never knew I was in. Neighbors were complaining about screaming and banging. From my apartment door around 6 a.m., someone mentioned seeing people in pajamas outside, arguing, one of them crying. I smiled, not out of cruelty, but relief. The storm was passing, and for once, I wasn't standing in the middle of it. Around noon, she sent her final message. You're heartless. Everyone's stuck here because of you. I can't believe you'd do this to me. I didn't need to. The note on the door had already said everything. Later, one of her friends DM'd me on Instagram a short message. Bro, that was cold, but kinda legendary. That night, I imagined the moment they woke up, disoriented, hungover, realizing the locks had changed, and they were trapped in someone else's mess. Her mess. I could almost hear her voice, snapping at everyone, scrambling to call me, trying to spin it into another pity story. But for the first time, I didn't care how she explained it, because the truth was finally louder than her lies. By the time I got back to the apartment that afternoon, the building was buzzing. A neighbor in the hallway gave me a look, half curious, half entertained. Rough morning? She asked. I just smiled. You could say that. When I reached my door, I saw exactly what I expected. Natalie standing there with 2 police officers. Her hair was messy, makeup smudged, fury burning beneath her forced composure. That's him? She blurted out the moment she saw me. He locked me out illegally. My stuff's still inside? One of the officers turned to me. Sir, can we talk? I nodded calmly, handed him the folder I'd prepared, lease agreement, photos, and a printed thread of text messages proving she was a guest, not a tenant. The officer flipped through them quietly while Natalie kept shouting in the background. He can't just throw me out. I've been living here. The officer sighed and looked at her. Ma'am, your name isn't on the lease. He's the legal resident. You'll need to collect your belongings and leave. Her face drained of color. What? No, that's not. But the second officer cut in, firm but calm. You can gather your things peacefully, or we'll have to escort you out. Your choice. For once, she didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, trembling, a cocktail of rage and disbelief. Her friends, the same ones who once treated my home like a crash pad, avoided eye contact. They looked embarrassed, defeated. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You've got an hour, I said quietly. Take what's yours. Leave the rest. She glared at me, tears threatening to spill, and whispered, You're going to regret this. But I didn't, not even for a second. As the officers watched, she gathered her clothes, her makeup, her chaos, and walked out of my life one last time. The silence after she left felt unreal. For the first time in months, my apartment actually sounded like a home. No laughter, no arguments, no footsteps that didn't belong. Just peace. I spent the next day cleaning every trace of her. Empty bottles, perfume-stained towels, a dozen half-burnt candles that made the air smell like denial. Then came the fallout. Natalie, predictably, ran straight to social media. Her posts were theatrical selfies with puffy eyes. Captions like, some people only help when they can control you, and imagine being heartless enough to throw someone out when they're struggling. Within hours, mutual friends were messaging me, some demanding explanations, others silently judging, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the truth has a funny way of revealing itself when you stop defending yourself. 2 days later, screenshots started circulating. One of her own friends, the same ones who used to crash at my place, leaked group chats of Natalie, bragging about how she basically lived rent-free and had her ex wrapped around her finger. The comments section flipped overnight. Suddenly, the sympathy posts were flooded with laughing emojis and comments like, "Girl, this isn't victimhood, it's freeloading." Even mutual friends reached out privately. "Dude, I had no idea," one said. Another simply texted, "Respect." Natalie tried damage control. "Is posting along," she said rant, but no one bought it anymore. Her lies had turned on her, loud, messy, and public. Meanwhile, I kept my silence. I didn't gloat, didn't subtweet, didn't explain. I just went on with my life. Because that was the real win, living peacefully while her world imploded under the weight of her own words. For once, the narrative wasn't hers to twist. It belonged to the truth, and the truth was finally loud enough to speak for itself. A few months passed before I even realized how much lighter life had become. No more strangers in my kitchen. No more drama disguised as help. No more guilt twisted into obedience. Just quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned, not empty. I sold the apartment soon after. It wasn't that I couldn't stand the memories. It was that I wanted a new space. One that didn't carry the echo of my own hesitation. I moved into a smaller place across town, just enough for me and my peace. The first night there, I unpacked in silence, made coffee, and watched the city lights flicker through the window. It felt like breathing after holding my breath for too long. Every now and then, I'd hear her name through mutual circles. Apparently, she'd bounced between places, telling different versions of the story. In some, I was cruel. In others, I was heartbroken. I didn't correct any of them. Let people believe what they want. I had my truth, and it was enough. Sometimes I think back to the moment I let her in again, how easy it was to mistake kindness for weakness, guilt for love. I used to wonder if I'd gone too far by changing the locks. But now, I see it differently. I didn't shut her out. I finally shut myself in. One night, while unpacking an old box, I found that note I'd left on the door, the one that said hotels closed. Checkout time was an hour ago. I laughed quietly to myself, folded it, and slipped it into a drawer. Not as a reminder of revenge, but as proof of growth. She used my home to host her chaos. But in the end, I was the one who checked out with my sanity, my dignity, and my peace intact.